Imagine trying to slice the densest and most unforgiving material in nature, using little more than garden tools. We are talking about granite, massive blocks weighing hundreds of tons, compacted with such density that today they would challenge even the most robust industrial machinery. The official narrative, the one printed in school textbooks, insists that the architects of the ancient world accomplished these feats armed only with soft copper chisels and vegetable fiber ropes. But there is a problem with this story. When we get close to these surfaces, we find tubular drill marks, precise striations and cuts that, according to modern engineers, would require the rotation and hardness of diamond-tipped drill bits. Physics simply does not add up with archaeology, and if you think this is just an isolated anomaly, think again. From Peru to Egypt, passing through Japan, we find identical technological signatures. Civilizations separated by impassable oceans and millennia of history seem to have shared the same manual of forbidden engineering. Is it just a cosmic coincidence? Or are we looking at the fragments of a collective memory that we have forgotten? Today we will dissect 6 of the most baffling locations on Earth. Archaeologists and geologists have fought academic battles over these sites for decades, but our mission here is surgical, to remove the layer of mysticism and face the raw facts. And what is about to be revealed has the potential to rewrite the timeline of the human experience. Our first coordinate takes us to the humid jungles of the island of Java in Indonesia. For centuries, the local population climbed the slopes of Mount Gunung Padang. To them, it was a place of reverence, a sacred hill dotted with ancient rocks where the spirits of ancestors resided. It was believed to be just that, a natural formation blessed by tradition. But in 2010, the perception of this site changed drastically. A team of geologists arrived at the location, not in search of lost temples, but to monitor seismic faults. They turned on their ground-penetrating radars, expecting to see standard geological layers. What the screens showed, however, sent a shiver down the spine of the scientific community. Below the earth, the roots and the grass, the mountain was not just a mountain. It was a structure. The data revealed chambers and artificial forms hidden under tons of soil. When samples of organic material were extracted from a depth of 30 meters and subjected to radiocarbon dating, the results were so absurd that the equipment had to be recalibrated. The date pointed to 20,000 years ago. Let's put this in perspective. We are talking about the height of the Ice Age. The planet was a hostile place. Mammoths walked the tundra, and human civilization, according to academic consensus, was nothing more than small nomadic groups sheltering in caves. The Great Pyramids of Egypt would only be dreamed of 15,000 years in the future. The discovery went viral like a digital wildfire, as it threatened to demolish the foundation of everything we think we know about our evolution. How could hunter-gatherers who barely mastered agriculture orchestrate a mega-engineering project? There was no state, no bureaucracy, no farms to sustain a massive workforce. Immediately, conspiracy theorists filled the gaps. Whispers about submerged Atlantis and extraterrestrial interventions began to echo. After all, who else would have the technical capacity to erect what could be the oldest pyramid in the world, in an era when humanity was supposedly crawling? However, the truth about Gunung Padang turned out to be more earthly, though no less ingenious. After the dust of speculation settled, geology offered a fascinating answer regarding the building blocks. Those elongated and perfect stones were not cut by lasers, but shaped by the violent cooling of volcanic lava, a phenomenon known as columnar basalt. Nature manufactured the bricks. Man only organized them. But do not be mistaken. This does not solve the mystery, it only deepens it. We are still facing a monumental sociological enigma. Even with the stones ready, the effort to drag, stack, and design this artificial mountain, terrace by terrace, would require a social cohesion that, theoretically, should not exist at that time. How did scattered tribes unite for centuries around a common architectural goal without the coercion of kings or emperors? While in Indonesia the mystery lies in the organization of pieces provided by nature, our next stop challenges logic through the opposite way: calculated destruction. We travel now to the state of Maharashtra, in India, where the Kailasa temple is located. Preparing for what you are going to see here is impossible. Unlike any other monumental structure in the world, which is built by adding block upon block, Kailasa was created through subtraction. It is not a construction, it is a sculpture on a titanic scale. The ancient engineers looked at a mountain of solid rock and visualized a complete temple inside it. Starting from the top and going down vertically, they removed everything that was not temple. Think about the complexity of this. A calculation error at the top, an accidental fracture in the rock, and the entire project would be ruined before even reaching the base. There was no Control-Z. There was no mortar to glue a broken piece back. We are talking about a complex of 9 floors, filled with columns, staircases, life-size elephant statues, and intricate reliefs, all carved from a single continuous monolith. To free this structure from the mountain, it is estimated that 200,000 tons of volcanic rock had to be removed. If we put all this rubble into modern train wagons, the cargo line would stretch for 40 kilometers on the horizon. And here is where the mathematics becomes disturbing. Inscriptions suggest that this impossible masterpiece was completed in just 18 years during the 7th century. Do the math. To achieve this goal, the workers would have to extract, break, and transport about 30 tons of rock every day. This means 30 tons removed come rain or shine, with no holidays, no breaks, operating at a frenetic industrial pace. And this calculation does not even include the time necessary for artistic design, structural planning, or the fine finishing of the sculptures. The idea that this was accomplished only with manual pickaxes and rudimentary hammers defies not only engineering but human physiology itself, suggesting that something fundamental about the tools or methods used still remains hidden in the shadows of history. The internet is saturated with theories that attempt to fill the gaps in our understanding. Forums and viral videos insist that the ancient Indians possessed lost technologies. Gigantic machines whose traces were supposedly imprinted on the walls, directional sound devices capable of liquefying granite, or even high-power lasers abandoned by stellar visitors. It is a seductive narrative. After all, how else would we explain the insane speed and surgical precision of cuts that even today would be a logistical nightmare for modern engineering? However, the answer to the Kailasa enigma does not require spaceships, but rather a brutally ingenious understanding of physics and labor organization. Structural engineers analyzed the site and realized that the miracle of speed lay in the method of attack, vertical excavation. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt, where every block needed to defy gravity by going up ramps, at Kailasa, gravity was the greatest ally. The debris was simply pushed into the abyss, clearing the path instantly. And as for the laser tools, the reality is even more fascinating. The ancient masters mastered a silent and devastating demolition technique. They drilled lines of holes into the living rock and inserted dry wooden wedges. Then the magic happened. They soaked the wood. As the vegetable fiber absorbed the water, it expanded with a monstrous hydraulic force, capable of fracturing tons of solid rock with a precision that no modern explosive could replicate. It was not sorcery. It was applied thermodynamics. But the most impressive resource was not the wood, but the flesh. We are talking about a human choreography on an industrial scale. Thousands of stonemasons working in uninterrupted shifts, a human anthill devouring the mountain and leaving behind a work of art. Kailasa remains there, in plain sight, a monument not to forgotten technologies, but to the terrifying discipline of the human mind. But while this temple challenges the sky under the sunlight, the next mystery remained hidden in the darkness, protected by the best vault in the world, the ocean. We need to travel now to the extreme west of the Japanese archipelago, to the turbulent waters of Yonaguni Island. The year was 1986. Kihachiro Arataki, an experienced diving instructor, descended into the depths not in search of lost cities, but looking for a new spot to observe hammerhead sharks. The blue silence enveloped everything. He expected to see the silhouette of a predator, but what emerged from the underwater mist made his air regulator almost fall from his mouth. Before him, rising from the seabed, was a colossal mass of stone. It did not look like a random rock formation. It resembled a fortress or a stepped pyramid that had been swallowed by time. Arataki swam over perfectly flat terraces, observed right angles that defied natural erosion, and identified what seemed to be roads circling the monument. The dimensions were, to say the least, disturbing. A stone leviathan extending for 150 meters in length and 40 in width. When the images reached the surface, the scientific world collapsed. Whispers began about the Japanese Atlantis. The chronological problem was evident. For that city to have been built on dry land, the sea level would have to be drastically lower. And the last time the ocean was at that level was during the height of the Ice Age, about 10,000 years ago. If Yonaguni is artificial, it rewrites everything. It means that a complex civilization existed 5,000 years before the first cities of Sumer or the pyramids of Egypt. The proponents of alternative history were quick to point out the legendary continent of Mu, the peaceful equivalent of Atlantis. They highlight details that geology struggles to explain. 2 perfect round holes on the edge of a slab, suggesting the fitting of wooden pillars, and a carved rock that eerily resembles a turtle's head or a human face staring eternally to the south. Who would have the capacity to erect such a port before the global thaw drowned it? The scientific community split in half. Conventional archaeologists shake their heads, skeptical, while geologists offer a cold counter-proposal. The rock of Yonaguni is composed of sandstone and mudstone, materials that tend to fracture in straight planes under tectonic stress. Centuries of strong currents would have sanded the stone, creating the illusion of architecture. But there is a third way, a theory that even the most skeptical begin to consider. What if the answer is not nature or man, but both? It is very likely that tectonic forces created the rough draft of the structure, and prehistoric peoples, seeing the majesty of the place, used it as a quarry or sanctuary, trimming the edges and carving passages where nature left the work incomplete. A collaboration across millennia. Water knows how to keep secrets, it is true, but sometimes the earth hides them with even more jealousy. Let us go now to Turkey, where the discovery of a lost world began not with a scientific expedition, but with a simple home renovation project. Imagine the scene. A farmer in the Cappadocia region decides to expand his basement. He takes a sledgehammer, strikes an old wall, and instead of solid earth, the wall gives way to the void. Before him opens a dark tunnel, where the wind blows coming from the depths. It was 1963, and that man did not know it, but he had just found the back door to Derinkuyu. When archaeologists crawled through that hole, what they found defied sanity. It was not a secret basement, nor a hermit's cave. It was a metropolis. The underground city plunged into the Earth's crust for 18 dizzying floors. In perpetual darkness, a complex infrastructure allowed up to 20,000 people to live, eat and sleep simultaneously, accompanied by their livestock and supplies. They had everything down there: schools for the children, churches for faith, cellars for wine, industrial oil presses and stables. But the detail that makes the spine chill is the survival engineering. The mining shafts descend 85 meters, connected to a ventilation system so sophisticated that fresh air reaches the deepest levels, undetectable from the surface. This raises the most disturbing question of all: fear. No one builds an 18-floor tomb city to live like a mole unless the surface has become a hell. Why would anyone abandon the sunlight voluntarily? Conspiracy theorists suggest that Derinkuyu was not a dwelling, but an apocalyptic bunker. What were they hiding from? A nuclear war forgotten in prehistory? A brutal climate cataclysm? Or perhaps, as the oldest and most controversial texts suggest, they were hiding from a threat that did not come from the Earth, but that patrolled the skies in silence. The proponents of the ancient astronauts theory fix their gaze on details that seem to scream for a paranormal explanation. They point to the claustrophobic corridors, deliberately designed so that only one person could pass at a time, and to the massive doors, stone discs of half a ton that could only be rolled and locked from the inside. What were they so afraid of? Who, or what, was outside trying to enter with such fury as to require such absolute defense? Historians offer a more earthly answer, however, no less terrifying. Derinkuyu was not built to hide from aliens, but from very real monsters, other human beings. These lands were the bloody chessboard of empires: Romans, Arabs, Mongols, waves of invaders swept the region for centuries. The genius here is not extraterrestrial, it is geological. The builders realized that the local volcanic tuff had a magical property. It was soft like butter while underground, easy to excavate, but as soon as it came into contact with the air, it hardened like reinforced concrete. It was the perfect disappearing trick. When the dust of an enemy army appeared on the horizon, an entire civilization evaporated. The invaders marched over the surface, frustrated and confused, without ever imagining that meters beneath their boots, life continued pulsating in absolute silence. Derinkuyu is not a monument to fear. It is a brutal testament to human ingenuity when cornered. But while Cappadocia offered a refuge for the living, in the middle of the blue vastness of the Pacific Ocean exists a place that the locals call Whispering, the City of the Dead. If you travel today to the remote island of Pohnpei, you will receive a stern warning from any inhabitant. Never, under any circumstances, remain in the ruins of Nan Madol after sunset. By daylight, the site is an archaeological enigma. But when night falls, the islanders swear that the spirits of the ancient kings awaken, and they do not tolerate intruders in their domain. Nan Madol defies logic from the first glance. It is the only ancient city on the planet, built not on solid ground but over water, erected defiantly between mangroves and sharp coral reefs. They nicknamed it Venice of the Pacific, but forget the romance of Italian gondolas. The atmosphere here is heavy, almost oppressive. We are talking about 92 interconnected artificial islands, surrounded by walls that rise to 8 meters in height, the equivalent of a 3-story building, rising directly from the ocean. And the material? They are not bricks. They are prismatic logs of magnetized basalt. Some of these columns weigh 5 tons, others reach 50. If you sum up every stone used to erect Nan Madol, the total weight exceeds 750,000 tons. To put this insanity in perspective, this volume rivals the Great Pyramid of Giza. But while Egypt had a population of millions and an imperial economy to sustain the work, Pohnpei, according to anthropologists, housed at most 25,000 people living in a tribal society. They did not have metal. They did not have the wheel. They did not have cranes. However, in some inexplicable way, they transported these monoliths from quarries located on the opposite side of the island, crossed dense jungles, impenetrable swamps, and finally positioned each piece in the water with the precision of a watchmaker. The local belief that the place is cursed is not just folkloric superstition, it has a macabre historical precedent. In 1907, the island was under German rule. Governor Victor Berg, a man of science and skepticism, decided that the legends were nonsense. Ignoring the terrified pleas of the natives, he broke into one of the royal tombs in the heart of Nan Madol. What he found inside should have been the peak of his career: bones, but not ordinary bones. According to his reports, they were bones of giants, much larger than standard human anatomy. But Berg's victory was short-lived. The morning following the desecration, the governor died suddenly. It was not a peaceful death. He died screaming, in an agony that colonial doctors could not diagnose. To the locals, the sentence was clear: he disturbed the rest of the Saudleur. The mystery of the construction of Nan Madol has been driving researchers crazy for decades. The logistics seem impossible. Trying to roll a 50-ton column through the jungle, the wheels would sink into the mud instantly. Dragging it? The friction would be so colossal that it would require thousands of men, a workforce that simply did not exist on the island. That is why the legend of the twin brothers, Olosopa and Olosipa, persists. They say they arrived from a distant land and did not use muscles, but magic. Oral tradition states that they levitated the stones using sound waves, making the basalt blocks fly like birds to their places. Modern theorists take this idea to the field of science fiction. They point to bizarre magnetic anomalies often detected in the area. Compasses spin senselessly. Electronic equipment fails. Seen from above, the city plan disturbingly resembles a computer circuit diagram, where the water channels would act as conductors. Could the basalt columns be not just walls, but components of an ancient power plant, or an antenna left by stellar visitors? Was it the residual radiation of this unknown technology that killed Victor Berg so quickly? Academic science, of course, rejects levitation and aliens. But even the most skeptical engineers are forced to admit the builders of Nan Madol were geniuses of logistics. The key to transporting the stones emerged when archaeologists stopped thinking like land dwellers and started thinking like sailors. Dragging the stones was stupidity. The secret lay in the water. They theorized that the islanders used colossal rafts of bamboo and wood, taking advantage of the high tide. The water supported the weight that the land refused, but this solves only half of the problem. Making the stone float is one thing. Lifting a 50-ton block to 8 meters in height without the help of hydraulic machines is a challenge of another magnitude. It was here that they applied a brilliant variation of the inclined plane method. The construction method defies conventional logic. They did not stack stones randomly. They created an interlocking structure, a technique similar to building log cabins, but applied to basalt monoliths that defy gravity. Engineering suggests the use of palm trunks as colossal levers, raising the city layer by layer in a Herculean effort. But the true revelation of Nan Madol is not in the how, but in the why. Why invest an amount of human energy capable of breaking an entire civilization? The answer reveals a political cynicism that would make Machiavelli seem like an amateur. Nan Madol was not designed as a military fortress, nor as a benevolent religious sanctuary. It was a golden cage. The Sodeleur dynasty ordered all rival chiefs and their families to move to this city of floating stone. Under the pretext of honor and proximity to the emperor, they were, in fact, being incarcerated. The design was diabolical. The artificial islets did not possess a drop of fresh water. The soil was sterile, incapable of sustaining crops. Everything, from the most basic coconut to drinking water, needed to be imported via boat from the mainland. The chiefs lived in palaces, but they were in total logistical dependence on the emperor. At the first sign of rebellion, the boats stopped. Hunger was the prison guard. Nan Madol was, effectively, the first elite concentration camp in history, where architecture served as the supreme weapon of absolute tyranny. While in the Pacific engineering served social control, in the desert of Egypt, it served something that transcends material understanding. Forget the pyramids of Giza or the weathered gaze of the Sphinx. The true mystery of Egypt is not under the scorching sun, but buried in the suffocating darkness of Saqqara, in a place called Serapeum. The discovery of this location seems like a movie script. In 1850, the archaeologist Auguste Mariette saw something emerge from the sands, the head of a sphinx. Following the trail, he unearthed an entire avenue that ended at a sealed door. The barrier was so formidable that Mariette had to use explosives to breach the entrance. When the smoke dissipated and the light of the torches cut through the millennial darkness, the explorers found themselves in a corridor of absolute silence. What they found in the side niches defies sanity. 24 titanic sarcophagi made of black, pink, and grey granite. The dimensions are aggressive to the human mind, 4 meters long, 3 high. The weight varies between 70 and 100 tons each. We are talking about the mass of 2 modern battle tanks, sealed by lids of 30 tons. But the detail that made Mariette's blood run cold was not the size, it was the floor. There was a layer of pristine dust. In it, the footprints of the last workers who left there 3,000 years ago were still fresh. The place had not been looted, it was virgin. The archaeologists trembled with anticipation. They expected to find the mummies of the sacred Apis bulls, covered in gold and precious stones. With a monumental effort, the first lid was slid open. And inside, nothing. Absolute vacuum. No bones, no gold, no dust. Only the vitreous shine of polished stone reflecting the disappointment of the explorers. The emptiness inside the most complex containers of antiquity generated an abyss of theories. Why create a vault of 100 tons to keep nothing? And then the nightmare becomes technical. Engineer Christopher Dunn analyzed the Serapeum with modern instruments, and the results are disturbing. The precision of the internal corners is surgical. When touching a precision square to the internal wall of the granite, not a beam of light passes through. The surface is perfectly flat, with an error measured in fractions of the thickness of a human hair. The angles are exactly 90 degrees. Try to visualize the scene. A mason from the Bronze Age, stuck inside a granite box illuminated by an oil lamp, polishing one of the hardest materials on Earth until reaching optical precision. One mistake, one slip of the hand, and the entire piece would be ruined. For the proponents of alternative history, the Serapeum is the definitive proof of advanced machinery. Granite, rich in quartz crystals, generates piezoelectricity under pressure. The theory suggests that these boxes were not tombs, but components of a planetary battery, shields against radiation, or even something more exotic. Orthodox Egyptologists point to the crude hieroglyphs scratched on the surface of some sarcophagi as proof of their primitive origin. But the contrast is stark. The quality of the writing is childish compared to the perfection of the box. This led to the inheritance theory. The dynastic Egyptians did not build the Serapeum, they found it. They discovered these artifacts from a previous era and tried to appropriate them, scratching their names on the perfect surface like a graffiti artist signing a work of art he does not understand. Science tries to explain the cutting with copper saws and quartz sand. Does it work? In theory, yes, but the cutting rate would be millimeters per hour. To manufacture a single sarcophagus with this technology, decades of uninterrupted work would be necessary. But the final blow to rationality is spatial logistics. The tunnels of the Serapeum are claustrophobic. Two men can barely walk side by side. How do you maneuver a block of 100 tons through these corridors? How do you make 90-degree turns with an object of this size in a confined space? And, the most impossible of all, how did they lower these sarcophagi into the niches that are below floor level, and then place the lids with millimeter precision without lateral space for levers, pulleys, or human team? It is like putting a ship inside a bottle if the ship weighed the same as a locomotive. We have traversed a dizzying journey, from the mountains of Indonesia to the underground cities of Turkey, from the reefs of the Pacific to the forbidden corridors of Egypt. These monuments are separated by oceans and millennia, but they whisper the same uncomfortable story. It is tempting to look at these structures and invoke aliens or magic. It is an easy way out. The truth, however, might be much deeper and more human. Perhaps our mistake is the arrogance of labeling the past as primitive. They did not have smartphones, but they possessed something that we have lost, an understanding of matter, of time, and of patience that our digital mind can no longer process. When looking at the impossible polishing of the granite or the social engineering of Nan Madol, we are forced to question if we are at the peak of evolution or if we are the amnesiac survivors of something much greater. History is not a straight ascending line. It is a cycle, and we are just walking over the ruins of those who knew how to tame stone in ways that today we consider miracles. What else is hidden under the sand, waiting for the right moment to challenge everything we think we know?